Hello everyone, welcome to question 14 of the series. The question reads, should there be a minimum wage? What if employers want to pay people $1.25 per hour, and some desperately poor people would work for that wage? Is the government being unjust by requiring employers to pay them at least $7.25 per hour? This question tests the limits of markets. Because sometimes the governments intervene so that people would gain rights and happiness. A libertarian would agree that $1.25 is fine if that is what is agreed to. Libertarians trust the market economy a lot. The free market is where people make the decisions. When consenting adults come to an agreement, the government should not intervene. That is what libertarians, including Robert Nozick, would say. Others, including almost everybody in the world, would say no. A utilitarian would say that employers and company owners are rich and they do not need the excess money they will miss from paying their workers $1.25 an hour. Let's say they had $100, they had $10,000, they had $1 million, they had $10 million. If you add $5 to that, that is a small amount of money. Even if that's many hours a month and you add $180 to that or $200 to that, that's not a big money for them. But they would think that the workers gain a lot of benefits from getting that extra money. Because if you work for 8 hours a day and you're not even able to earn money for your food or for your rent, and you have to live in extreme poverty, and if that becomes the case, then they're not getting that much utility from their wage. But that $6 or around that money will be a big increase for them. This is not the only calculus, of course, because utilitarianism is quite a broad term, and it can also be stretched out to preventing riots from workers, or keeping the character and dignity of people, and other calculations that might take. A Rawlsian would say no to the question, supporting a minimum wage by the government. They would likely say that society should also benefit the least advantaged. This is because if people were to make a social contract in original positions, they will benefit the least advantaged. Well, let's put it like this. People, they're making a social contract, they're making the laws of the world under a veil of ignorance. They are, let's say, -1 year old, and they're not born yet. And they might be born as a rich person who ends up being an employer, and they might be born as a poor person who ends up being a minimum wage worker. And they don't want to risk themselves because they might be the minimum wage worker, so they will make policies that don't absolutely throw away the minimum wage worker. And according to them, by harming the working class, society is only favoring the rich, not giving enough to the poor people at all. A Kantian will also probably say no. It's not super clear as Rawls or the utilitarians, but I still think they will. Because paying $1.25 an hour can make conscious think that employers are treating their workers as means of profit, not ends. Yes, they see the workers as a way to make the company bigger, or for the CEOs or the BODs to earn money, but not as ends, not as people that are worthy of dignity and respect. This is because it is quite evident intuitively that it is an insufficient amount and not a fair exchange for their labor. A Lockean might also say no. They might not, and it's not directly mentioned, but I think it's pretty clear here. You can assume that they will, since Locke wants the protection of rights and the common good for all, not selected people. For example, the right of property, the right of labor, not the right of labor, the right to liberty. If people earn $1.25, do they have the right to liberty? No, because they will have to then work for like 16 hours a day. And even with that money, they will have zero liberty. They will be forced to go to the cheapest houses, or don't live in a house, forced to eat the cheapest foods, and that's not liberty. That's being forced, and that's being in an extremely adverse situation. And Locke wants the benefit for the common good. The state he mentions is the civil state, and he also calls that the commonwealth. He wants the benefits and welfare for everybody. Now for my opinion, I will not explain the logic again, but I side with the Rawlsians here. That argument seems more correct to me. Although, I am a utilitarian, but I just believe that his logic is correct and plays a big role in increasing utility for people. I'll rebut to libertarians. I believe that good society is a goal, and freedom is a tool. When freedom only helps selective people and not others, that's a society designed to harm people, not help them. They may argue, well, it's a market society. You should have been the employer with your hard work. You're a worker because you didn't work hard enough. I reject that for two reasons. First of all, current society is really unfair. Did they really choose to be lazy? Were they lazy? People become minimum wage workers not because they're lazy, but because they were raised in a poor background. If their parents had little money, and especially if they didn't live in the US or they lived in a developing country, let's say, and they didn't even get enough government programs, then how could they start a business? They wouldn't be able to. Or, for the same reason, also arbitrarily not their fault, let's say they were born with no talents. They don't know IT, they don't have artistic talents or other talents to start a business or buy a McDonald's. Then, for the same reason, that's not fair. Or let's say they were in a state where they cannot put in effort. They might just have DNAs that don't make them put enough effort. Or they might just be a position where society doesn't really expect them to put that much effort, or they weren't taught that well. And there's so many factors that create your future and not just your own efforts. And society doesn't really award efforts either. Let's say, for example, Michael Jordan. He put in lots of efforts, but other basketball players also put in a lot of effort, maybe even more than him. And from all those NBA listed players and non-NBA listed players, there's gotta be some people who put more effort than him. Same for this. More than the employer, there would be people who put an effort to be an employer. They just failed to. So effort is not the standard here, and that cannot be the conclusion. The second reason why I reject libertarians is that even if they were lazy slouchbags and weren't able to start a successful company, that still has nothing to do with giving them wages impossible to live with. They are in unequal bargaining power, and the workers will get less than what they deserve. I'm saying that through $1.25 an hour, or anything lower than $7.25 for that matter, fails to respect human dignity, fails to respect the freedom to buy things that people should be able to. And there's a limit to where you put a minimum on that. That cannot be just anything that the employer and employees agree with. So, I think many people agree with me. This really comes down to a consensus. But that's it for today. See you in the next entry.